So let's just assume that you now have a team, that you've gone through the recruiting, the interviewing, the hiring, and the onboarding. Onboarding could be another 20 minutes in and of itself, and we may do that at another date. But now you've got this employee, you've got this group of employees, and you say, that's my team. Okay, good. How are you treating that team? The biggest, I don't want to use the word failure, but the biggest shortcoming, challenge or shortcoming in terms of managing team is for the leader of that team to set great expectations. Performance starts there.
I want the perfect employee who can do 8 things perfectly.
So what I strive for with team and company is to be able to create a culture of accountability. I want you to imagine that. Just to imagine that, because I can't tell you how many business owners that have approached us in our early meetings with them that just would like to, no, I can't anymore, but they'd like to pull the hair out of their head. That they just don't feel like people feel the same sense of accountability that they do. Well, in some respects, okay, well, let's examine ourselves first before we start examining them. Because creating that culture of accountability actually often resides with the manager-owner. And so let me share that with you.
Because it's also sharing information, but then there's sometimes oversharing information.
Well, you can always temper the direction on the over, right? It's when we feel so concerned about sharing anything that we underestimate the value of sharing. So here's something that I want you to really have put up in your head, and I know it might sound philosophical, but it's really not. It's very academic, and that is to create the personal accountability. The idea is to put in your head, wait a second, I don't get what I expect. I get what I accept. And when we are accepting results, if you will, from an employee that, okay, it misses the mark, but it's pretty close, I'll just fill in the gaps myself. Well, guess what? You just condition that person to always perform at a lower level than the expectation. So let's not do that. If we want to create a team of performers that service the company the way they can be rewarded for, then let's make sure we're setting great expectations. Okay? So building a culture of accountability actually starts with you. Accountability doesn't happen automatically. I mean, it just doesn't. Let's just recognize that. So when you don't feel like you're getting what you thought you should be getting, start with yourself. Where did I fail to communicate? Was I not specific enough? Was I overly generalizing because I just didn't want to go into what might be called micromanagement? And we'll touch on that a little bit. By the way, I'm not a believer in micromanagement. I think that's crap. When a manager says, but I don't want to micromanage. Or an employee, a line worker says, you're micromanaging me. I'm like, there's really no such thing. What it is I'm managing to results. That's what I'm managing to.
And then offering feedback. Because sometimes what they do is they deliver what they think is perfect, and you accept it, but you don't give them any feedback. Like, okay, well, you could have done this to improve it.
You know, you're always trying to close the gap, and if the gap is partly your problem, which oftentimes it is, then admit it and correct it. Okay, so where did I fail to communicate? That's where you start when you feel like the culture of accountability is falling short. Where did I forget to include what I needed in the initial discussion? Okay, or who did I forget? Sometimes maybe we thought, well, I'll just talk to Sarah, and, Sarah will share it with everybody else. Well, really? How engaged are the everybody else's of the world if we aren't actually sharing with them right from the get-go? Very bad. What could I have done or done differently to get more favorable results? Well, it's kind of the same as the first one. You're self-examining. If I'm going to be setting great expectations and creating a culture of accountability, then it really starts with me as the business owner. Okay? Okay. Language of accountability is really important. Oops, I'm out of picture. That's okay. That's probably good. This is the glossary of failure that oftentimes we all adopted, and in many respects, somewhat by accident, somewhat because we're casual setters of expectations instead of purposeful setters of expectations. Is that right?
Setters.
Okay. The glossary of failure is when we're communicating an expectation and we use things like, I just need it soon. Or, well, when do you want it, boss? ASAP. Okay.
Well, I just did a project and I promised the client they'd have it by Monday. So Monday, it gives me between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. to get it to them.
Right.
But I'll probably get it to them by first thing Monday morning.
Right. And here's the issue here about this glossary of failure is unless we're really specific, imagine that employee trying to figure out where does this thing fit relative to the stuff that my boss gave me a day ago and 2 days ago. They can't. So do yourself a favor and the employee a favor by getting out of this glossary of failure and say, let's be specific. I used to say specificity, but it's really not very easy to say. So let's just start being specific.
So I needed this sooner than the other thing I needed it soon.
Okay. Can I bring you back to this slide?
Okay. Specific.
All right. Specific.
Specificity.
So be very specific about day, time of day, okay? Who owns it? If you're speaking with 3 team members, who of those 3 owns it? That person that you believe owns it could engage by your instruction the other 2 people for help. But at the end of the day, the person that you're saying, this is yours, get it done. That person knows that the law of single ownership has now been exercised here. So, if you've got something that needs to be done, don't give it to 3 people in equal amounts. Identify the one owner to say, you're the one who's going to bring me the results of the work on such and such a day and time. Now, we're going to get to what it actually looks like in a second.
But it also gives that one person the authority to say to those other 2, I need this done this way.
Correct. And those other 2 people know that, okay, let's call that guy John. John owns it. I have an obligation to support John. Okay, so whatever John says he needs to have done, I better do it because I got to support that deadline, that specific deadline. Try to avoid accepting these words, like instead of I'll try, I should, I might, look for I will. I got it. Team member says to team leader or to boss, I got it, I'll get it done. Okay. Now, here's a very important one. Oh, and here's what it looks like when I'm done.